Okay, now let's get to our while loop. The feature of the code that we're going to explore now that will allow us to repeat code the way we're seeing here is called the while loop. Now, I'm not sure if I should, I'm going to show you a basic while loop, and then I'm going to show you a while true loop. Now, what I'm doing is I'm putting in some statements inside a brand new block statement that we've now seen for the first time here. This is our fourth block statement. The first was if, the second was elif, the third was else. I think we understand how those work, but if you're not entirely sure, even if you are sure, you should go in and practice with if, elif, and else. Do a few of those exercises. Make sure that it makes sense to you. If you can, come up with novel questions like, I wonder if I did this, what would happen? I wonder if we did that, what would happen? What if I had an if followed by an if? Stuff like this. Anyway, try to do the exercises, see what you can get done. Now let's look at this though. This one is going to be very different than anything we've seen because this one is actually going to repeat statements. Let's run the code and see. Uh-oh. Oh no, I just did something bad. Haha. But it's not so bad. I just created an endless loop. Let's stop this. If you ever do create an endless loop, go ahead and press the red stop button here, and that'll make the code stop. I forgot to do something. I forgot to increase the value of num by 1. Now I'm incrementing num. Let's run it again with this updated code. Oh, I already have done there, so fine. Let's run it again. Okay, here's what I see. 0 and then bar, 1 and then bar, 2 and then bar. I actually don't like it this way. I want it to start with 1. So I'm going to move my num printing to after the first increment. Now let's explain how this is working. Because as you can see, certain statements are being repeated. And this is going to be the core of your homework problem. Your homework problem says, I want you to repeat these statements to a certain point. As you can see, the statements that are being repeated are the print statement, the other print statement, and the incrementing. Now, how do I know these are being repeated? Well, even though they're the only statements that are inside the while block, I can see below that 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar means that not only am I printing a number and a bar 3 times, but I'm also increasing the value of num each time. So I know that these statements are being repeated. Let's play the game of which line comes next now. At least we'll start doing that. It's going to go like this. And let's just do it quickly. Read the code with me as I narrate. 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 11, 12, 13, 14, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16. 3 times we repeated that block. Now, how does that happen? Why does it stop? There's a couple of questions here. The first thing is clearly that while is designed to repeat. That's what the while block does. It's unlike if, elif, and else. If, elif, and else will maybe do a statement, maybe not, right? That's how if, elif, and else work. But the while will repeat the statements over and over again. There are a number of specific rules that control this, and I call them the rules of while. The first rule of while is that if true, enter block. I'll say if the test is true. Now, this is just like the if statement. The if statement, if it's true, we enter the block. If it's not, we don't. So it starts with this statement, this rule that's very similar to the way that the if statement works. The second rule of while is this: when reaching the end of block, return to test. Now let's talk about that, because this is something that you need to not just understand, but begin to predict. All of these features that we learn, you want to be able to eventually predict what they're going to do because you learn the rules behind them. You can predict what len returns. What is the function len return? Integer, we know. What is the value of the integer? Whatever the length of the string is, we know. We know this, and we can begin to predict it. What's going to happen when you add two strings together with plus? They concatenate. We get back a new string. We know this. We know this. If we don't remember it, we remind ourselves. We look it up. We want to master this. We're going to master this. Okay, what are the rules of while? Well, first we have the test. That's easy to remember. It's just like the if test. The block has a gate on it. The gate says enter or don't enter. Is num less than threshold? Yes. Gate is open. If the gate is open, we enter the block. We're now in the block. We go to line 12. What's the value of num after line 12? It's 0 plus 1, right? Num is now 1. We print 1. We can even look. We can read the code, say what's happening, and then confirm by seeing what's printed. So num is 1, and we print 1. Then we print a bar. There it is. Now, the second rule of while. When reaching the end of the block, return to the test, meaning go up to line 11. This is the mechanism that causes the while loop to repeat. Python knows that when it reaches the end of the while block, it must go back up to the test. That is just the rule, and we can predict it. We can say for sure that we know that when we get to the end of the block, we're going to go back and return to the test. That'll just be axiomatic. You're going to know that that's true. In the same way that you know len returns an int, and print shows something to the screen, and adding two strings is concatenation, and adding two numbers is a sum, we're going to know that at the end of the while block, when you get to the end of the while block, we return to test. Goes right back up. Now, when we get back up here, what is the value of num? Don't forget that we did increase the value of num by 1. So num is 1. And is 1 less than 3? Yes. So is the gate still open? Yes. 1 is less than 3, so the gate's still open. So now the process repeats. Num gets incremented to 2. Why? Because it was 1 before. Now it's 2. We print 2. We print the bar. And then the second rule, we go back up to test. Now num is what? 2. Is 2 less than 3? Yes. So is the gate open? Yes. We enter the block. Num becomes 3. We print 3. We print the bar. We go back up to test. Is the gate open? You tell me. Well, what's the value of num at this point? It's 3, right? We had to keep track of that in our minds. This is the thing about this new challenge for you. Before, the challenge was, well, what type and value am I got if I call len, or if I call round, or if I convert to string? What am I going to get back? That's your first challenge. Your new challenge is which line comes next. And the only way you're going to know this is if you keep track of the value of num as this progresses. Num is 0, and then we loop back. Num is 1, and then we loop back. Num is 2, and then we loop back. Num is 3, and then we loop back. What is the value of, is the gate open if num is 3? You tell me. Is 3 less than 3? No, it's false. So the gate is closed. And we now jump down to where? Line 17. Now, I don't know if that seemed like a lot or not. What it requires is that we keep track of the value of this variable as it advances, as well as which line comes next. And we can use these rules to do it. Just ask yourself, as you go through, what's the value of num? It's 1. Okay, we're printing 1, print bar, go back. 1 less than 3. Now num is 2. Print 2, print bar, go back. Now num is 2, it's less than 3. Num becomes 3, print bar, go back. Is 3 less than 3? No. Then when we leave, we're done. Let me show you an interesting debugging technique that I think really can work. And it can really help you keep track of what's happening. Look at that input statement. Remember, I told you before that I think the print statement is your best friend when it comes to debugging, and that's still true. The print statement will tell us a lot of interesting and good things. This is another really interesting tool when it comes to debugging. Look at input. Now, if you want, I'm going to put this code into the search, into the chat. And I would like you to go to 218 and put it into 218 and run the code yourself. I think we should all be running this code. You don't have to type it all. When you look in the chat right now. If you put your a cursor over the chat balloon, to the right, you can select the 3 dots and choose copy. Copy that in there. And then come here and in 218, just paste in the code like that. I just copied it from the chat. I think you should do this because I want you to experience this with me. Now, what I did was I put an input function call here. Let me ask you, can you say what will happen when the code reaches the input function? Can someone say out loud? What happens when we reach the input function?
It pauses and asks for a user input.
Right, it pauses and asks for user input, that's right. Now, in this case, I'm actually not going to capture the user input. I'm going to use input for a different reason. Let's see how it works. I think it's kind of interesting because we do know it's going to pause and it's going to wait. What's it going to wait for? It waits for us to hit enter, right? So look at this. It just iterated once, showed me that the value of num is 1. And then it came to input and it just said paused. Now, what's really cool about this is that it's going to stay paused until I hit enter. So I can hit enter. It goes through a second iteration and then it pauses again because it hit the input statement again. I think you should give this a shot. I want you to run it. You click in the code window, and every time it gets to pause, it's going to wait until you hit enter, and then it's going to keep going. This will allow you to see what happened in one iteration. The value of num kept increasing. Eventually, the value of num increased to the point where it was no longer less than threshold, because threshold is 3. It kept increasing until finally it became equal to threshold, at which point the test became false. And once the test became false, the first rule of while came back and said, if the test is true, enter block, but there's a second part to that test. It's just like if. Otherwise, drop below. Now, what do you think? Questions about this?
That pause could have been interesting when we had that infinite while loop earlier,
Yeah, yeah,
because then
really
you
good.
can inherently just create, add more or increment your value as you press enter each time.
Oh, I guess we could have it affect the value of num, I suppose. You could say that num equals input paused, I suppose. Maybe something like that, but you can't oh no, but here's the thing. Once it's running, you can't if you change the code, it's not gonna affect anything. Like I can't do this. It's not gonna notice. The reason it's not going to notice is that when you first run the code, it reads the code and then it's done looking at the code. And so you can't actually change the code in place while it's running. That won't work. If that's what you meant, like make a change to the code, add the num equals num plus one. Yeah. It would certainly help with the endless loop, at least to not just be running off endlessly, but we still need to stop it some other way. Here's the 0, 0, 0. Okay, num never changes and it's never going to stop. I still have to go up here and press stop, unfortunately. Okay, so what do you all think? Did you try running the code? Did you have it run like mine did? This is a good opportunity for you to try it out, but what do you think?